With that, I'd like us all to welcome Dr. James Hughes. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much for that introduction. Let me start off by offering all of you congratulations and then a basic admonition. First, congratulations. I think you are all still vertical, have not yet gone toes up. You have survived 2020. You have survived and endured the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. So it's not surprising that you have happily said good riddance to 2020 and welcome to 2021. And we all certainly have high hopes for 2021. However, in order not to jeopardize my hard-earned reputation as the Garden State doomster, a basic admonition must be raised. We also had very high hopes when 2020 unfolded, and we now know how that turned out. So temper your optimism. 2020 is in the history books, but 2021 may not be a slam dunk. We still have a dark winter to get through before the economic spring arrives, and that economic spring will arrive. Okay, let's begin with a brief economic perspective on 2020, and then we can put it in the history books. Last February, what turned out to be the terminal month of the record-breaking 128-month-long Great Expansion, we were living in a completely different world. We were in a Goldilocks economy, Not too hot, not too cold, just right. We had sustained employment growth, record low unemployment rates, and inflation was nowhere in sight. In fact, there was an over-the-rainbow fantasy that the roaring 1920s would be matched by the roaring 2020s. The bottom line is February 2020, the economy still had tremendous momentum that had been built up over a full decade. Here are the employment numbers for that 10-year period that ended in February 2020. US added 22.8 million jobs, 17.6% growth rate. New Jersey grew by a more modest 10.6%, still 405,600 jobs over 10 years was a pretty good pace of growth for the Garden State. So we did have substantial momentum. But then the economic world completely unraveled as a series of convulsive and staggering economic events unfolded. In a breathtaking 2-month collapse, 10 years of job growth were erased nationally. The nation lost 22.2 million jobs in March and April. That nearly matched the 22.8 million jobs gained during the preceding 10 years. But the nation had nothing on New Jersey, and this is the bottom half of the slide. Between February and April, the state lost 831,300 jobs. That was more than double the 10-year gain. 1 out of 5 total jobs disappeared in the state. The new roaring 2020s reality. By April, we had roaring levels of unemployment. Total jobs in New Jersey by April had fell back to the level of that of 1985, 35 years ago. But just as I thought the economy was sliding into the abyss, something happened, something which actually shocked me. The world neglected to come to an end. The economy was restarted in May and job growth resumed. Lockdowns were eased, businesses reopened with new health and social distancing protocols, and Congress and the Fed took aggressive steps to prop up households, businesses, and the financial community. This positioned the economy for last summer's strong bounce back, and bounce back it did. Nonetheless, the pattern of economic advance was subsequently transformed into a long recovery crawl, a potential multi-year journey. The Federal Reserve calls it the long slog ahead of us. I prefer the long recovery crawl. Now, I think it is well recognized that I'm the only really totally objective person in New Jersey. And it's my totally objective opinion that the recovery trajectory is going to take the form of what we call a Nike swoosh, a long, elongated trek to full recovery, a swoosh-shaped recovery path. And that's going to be evident in some of the following data and charts. However, by the end of the year, end of 2020, we had a flattening of the swoosh due to the winter chill. So my plea to the economic gods, don't step on my swoosh, don't squash my swoosh. So let's look at the recovery metrics and let's start with the nation. Two stunning 2020 reversals are evident. As I presented earlier, 22.8 million jobs were gained in 10 years. And then during the 2-month free fall, 22.2 million jobs were lost, wiping out the gains. Then we had a second reversal, April through November. This was the process of recapturing lost economic activity, and this is shown in the bottom of the slide. Between April and November, 12.3 million jobs were added to the national economy. That's a recovery rate of 55.4%. So we reached the halfway point. We've recovered more than half of the jobs we've lost, 55.4%. New Jersey experienced a similar recovery pattern. First reversal, as noted earlier, we lost 831,000 jobs in March and April, double our preceding 10-year gain. So this first reversal, we were hit far harder than the nation by the shocks of the coronavirus. But we have paralleled the nation during the second reversal, and this is in the bottom half of the slide. 405,700 jobs gained during the 7-month economic reopening. So we were recapturing lost economic activity. We recaptured 485,000 plus of the 831,000 jobs lost. That's a recovery rate, as shown on the bottom, 58.4%, slightly better than the national rate of 55.4%. So we're ahead of the nation. But we still have an enormous employment deficit to make up, which we will turn to in a moment. Let's just drill down a little bit deeper into the 7-month economic reopening. First, the nation. This chart shows the employment growth for each of the 7 recovery months, starting in May. The numbers are in thousands. May and June, record-setting job growth, the 2 left bars in the slide. First 2.7 million, and then an all-time record 4.8 million. Those were the 2 greatest employment growth months in the history of the Republic. The hardest sectors hit during the downfall or the free fall: restaurants, healthcare, support services, and retail trade led the sharp bounce back in those 2 months. But that surge did not last forever. The next 5 months, July through November, we experienced steadily declining monthly job gains, and you can see by the shrinking blue bars. So the nation's journey on the recovery highway has decelerated from the fast lane to the slow lane. So we are in a new phase of the recovery. The result of these decreasing gains is a noticeable flattening of the swoosh recovery trajectory. And this is one curve that we really don't want to flatten. So this slide shows the cumulative monthly employment deficit for each month since the start of the recession in February. And the deficit represents the number of jobs needed to get back to the employment level of February. The deficit peaked in April at 22.2 million jobs. We were 22.2 million jobs from the February peak, and that's the low point of the line graph. The deficit then contracted sharply the next 2 months, May and June, due to the rapid rehiring of laid off or furloughed workers. but the decreasing monthly job gains of July through November have started to flatten out the monthly deficit reduction slide. By November, the far right side of the slide, the nation was still 9.8 million jobs shy of reaching the pre-pandemic employment peak of February. New Jersey, similar shift to a slow recovery lane, but the pattern is somewhat more complex. Nonetheless, by October and November, job growth flatlined, with October actually showing a loss before bouncing back in November. Those are the two tiny blue bars on the right side of the slide. And the result is another flattening of the swoosh recovery trajectory. Like the nation, the state still has substantial employment arrears to make up. New Jersey has a deficit as of November of 345,600 jobs. Bottom line, we have a somewhat dark winter that's unfolding as we wait the vaccination of America in New Jersey. But in the context of increased federal support payments, we will definitely see an upswing by the midpoint of the year. So don't get depressed if we get some bad numbers in January and February. Now, after this first dose of economics, you're probably wondering, why the heck would anybody decide to become an economist? Well, I thought of three reasons, three very profound reasons. First, you can talk about money without ever having to make any money. Second, you can say trickle down with a straight pace. And third, if you rearrange the 9 letters in economics, you can easily get comic nose. Okay, what lies ahead? What transformative changes spawned by COVID-19 go beyond cyclical statistics we just reviewed? Big picture, potent economic structural adjustments followed the great 2007-2009 recession. We will see a repeat performance in the years ahead. As that famous economic forecaster from New Jersey, Yogi Berra, once observed, it's like economic deja vu all over again. So what's evident already? First, the pandemic has expedited the future. For example, as we all realize, 3 years of digital cultural adaptation took place in the first 3 weeks of the shutdown. COVID-19 has been a gasoline on the fire accelerant, such as accelerating remote work practices, working at home and online meetings and conferencing, accelerating the surge in e-commerce, and accelerating the bricks and mortar meltdown. A rapid change in each of these areas has been transformed into hyper change. For example, as we've all experienced because of online shopping growth, bricks and mortar retail carnage had long been underway. But what had been anticipated as a multi-year meltdown has taken place in a matter of months. Second, at the same time, the pandemic has also caused fundamental structural shifts in trend. Let's briefly look at 2. First, trend shift 1, the experiential economy. This was driven by millennials after the great 2009 recession. The often obsessive consumption of physical goods by baby boomers was replaced with the consumption of experiences by millennials. Acquisition of experiences rather than the acquisition of goods. But many of these experiences are now coronavirus hobbled by the new social distancing, crowd avoiding protocols. For example, FFF, food, fitness, and fun experiential activities, food, fitness, and fun, had emerged as a strategy to fill retail voids and vacancies in struggling shopping centers and malls that were battered by e-commerce. However, health imperatives now undermine the experiential economy and its associated lifestyles and real estate sectors. What this has done to shopping centers is triple F has been disrupted by the coronavirus and its aftershocks. In its stead, the shopping center world has been replaced by D, B, and V, distress, bankruptcy, and vacancy by its tenants. And the world of pain in this area will continue through 2021. In contrast, as you all know, New Jersey's economic landscape has been filling up with massive delivery systems known as fulfillment centers, windowless 1 million square foot behemoths. Now, what could sound more virtuous than a fulfillment center? What marketing genius came up with the level of fulfillment? It suggests happiness delivered, just what New Jersey ordered. Now there is a new complementary phenomenon that has been spurred on by the pandemic. To speed the delivery of happiness, e-commerce is producing smaller last mile delivery stations. A perfect location for last mile delivery stations are vacant retail properties due to their location. This portends a major land use transformation. Delivery speed is of the essence, and a new ecosystem is developing. Two dimensions among others. One, instead of consumers driving from their residence to the shopping center, commercial vehicles flow from the new shopping center-based last mile delivery stations to consumers' residences. So this portends new patterns of traffic flow. Current technology, delivery vans are now experiencing record sales. Mercedes-Benz Sprinters and Ford's Transit vans are hot, ideal for shorter routes and compressed delivery times. But that's today. In the years ahead, certainly by the end of the decade, autonomous vehicles may rule. And this is what may be coming to a former shopping center near you. There is also another complementary e-commerce phenomenon. The consumer does the last mile, not to shop, but to pick up. So curbside pickup has obviously soared, and it's now a quite common phenomenon. So surviving retailers may be converting shopping center stores to mini e-commerce fulfillment centers with drive-through pickup facilities. Trend shift two, office markets, work processes, and workplaces. This is now a watershed moment for the world of work, the basic functioning and structure of the office market and the workplace. Basic question, will the magnitude of distress in office markets caused by the pandemic match or surpass the distress of bricks and mortar retailing caused by the rise of e-commerce? The coronavirus shock may have exposed an outmoded white-collar workplace structure and ways of working. Work is now recognized, as of the start of 2021, more of an activity rather than as a place. And it probably was a major market failure that work simply as a physical place remained the dominant mindset for so long. The concept of aggregating people in one office location escaped serious disruption. But I think the pandemic has now revealed that many office ecosystems were being run simply as relics of the 20th century, despite massive infusions of 21st century information technology that fully transformed works. What is the future of the office? I think pre-COVID mindsets continued to adjust to the new reality as work as an activity, challenging the assumptions of the past. The future of the office is now subject to intense discussion and analysis, and a massive rethink of the traditional knowledge-based workplace is now taking place. Additional rethink, the blind acceptance of long commutes guided by rigid 9-to-5 schedules. Potential endangered species, the ritual of commuting 5 days per week to large centralized headquarters offices in order to simply be crammed cheek by jowl in a sea of workstations. So this was the reward for a 2-hour tortuous daily commute. Now, as we all know from experience, the spring of remote work, March of 2020 through June 2020, greatly accelerated the long-term shift to remote out of the office, digital work at home practices. Digital tools were adopted on a vastly accelerated timeline. Now, according to a McKinsey and Company survey, private companies pivoted to the new work arrangements 40 times faster than they thought was possible. They jumped 3 to 4 years ahead into the future workplace in 3 to 4 weeks, a quantum leap. And Zoom went from little known to ubiquitous. Zoom logins, 10 million per day at the start of January to 300 million per day by late March, 10 million to 300 million in less than 3 months. And then it really started to spread at hyper speed. I think at the end of the day, looking back, this could rank as one of the great office market disruptors of all time. Another metric just published by the University of Chicago, from mid-March through mid-September, a 6-month period, Americans spent 60 million fewer hours commuting to work, to and from work each day, 60 million hours per day saved. Not all of this was used for work. About 35% of the saved time was spent on primary jobs. So that's 22 million hours each workday spent on primary jobs due to non-commutation. So currently, I think the coronavirus has exposed the fragility of the broader office ecosystem. And at this stage of alternative strategies, I think the one that appears least likely in 2021 is that every organization will bring every employee back to the pre-pandemic office space 5 days per week. Instead, there may be a significant rebalancing of the entire office ecosystem, the entire work ecosystem. And this rebalancing process is now testing a range of hybrid work models. These would involve a de-densified, attendance-restricted, virus-resistant central offices or central hubs, much more space, perhaps twice as much space per employee, and numerous remote work options. The latter would comprise not only work from home, but also the establishment of smaller, multiple satellite office facilities. These would comprise micro offices, co-working spaces in suburban areas that are close to the residence clusters of remote workers. And such satellite offices near home locations would attempt to recreate the community aspects of central office life, perhaps several times per week. One model that is emerging or has been projected is a hub and spoke model, an extended multi-nodal geographic office footprint. So this would provide really a flexible toolkit of workplace offerings or platforms. And the central office may become a much less frequently attended hub. Potential new function, the hub is a club. The hub is a club, a place for onboarding new employees, a place for periodic, creative, direct in-person interaction, a place for building team spirit and organizational culture, and a place for big team meetings. Concurrently, intense private work and small team collaboration can be removed from the hub and distributed. Nonetheless, despite these possibilities, there is still yet no one blueprint or established playbook for the optimal way to adapt to these new exigencies. 2021 will be a period of new exigencies and new strategies. Unresolved questions. Will corporate cultures fade, creativities flag, team spirits erode with the diminishment of the central office? Alternatively, does bringing people together under a single roof actually promote interactions that create new ideas, or does it promote idle chatter? Is the central office really a glorified social chatterbox? In contrast, caveat on trying to control distributed satellite facilities, trying to corral staff in a myriad of disparate locations sounds like trying to herd cats. And if this new model is adopted, it's going to be the source of new administrative problems and a long period of experimentation. In any case, the adoption of a new model of flexible job mobility has significant potential to re-energize the suburban office landscape. This was New Jersey's nation-leading core economic competence in the final decades of the 20th century. Low-rise suburban office buildings, which we could label ground scrapers. But during the past 10 years, it became the poster child for yesterday's office economy and had long since fallen out of favor. But an emerging network workplace model potentially provides a new lifeline for suburban offices. So we could call this the potential revenge of the ground scrapers, a resurgence in the popularity of low-rise suburban office buildings. Urban skyscrapers ruled the past 2 decades. That rule is now being somewhat challenged, and this could potentially benefit an underutilized suburban office inventory. So the question is, will a geographically distributed office ecosystem become the new normal, a new abnormal, or a temporary aberrant? These are data from CBRE, the largest commercial real estate services firm in the world. As you can see, Manhattan, this is not vacancy rate, this is occupancy. Buildings may be fully leased. The occupancy rate indicates how many people are actually attending. Manhattan's office occupancy, 10%. Suburban offices in New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey, almost 1/3. So triple the occupancy rate of Manhattan. For the suburban office inventory, you don't have to take a subway to get to them, and you can avoid density-controlled elevators and easily used stairways. The high-rise buildings, at least currently, until we get a widely distributed vaccination process, have both horizontal and vertical transportation issues. Horizontal issues, mass transit avoidance is still a major issue. It is still a stressful experience despite heroic efforts of daily sanitization procedures by transportation agencies. Vertical transportation, the elevator is currently, under our current duress, the Achilles heel for high-rise buildings. The elimination of closely packed elevators has hindered the functioning of office towers, to say nothing of residential towers. Another difficulty related to this, lobby log jams and bottlenecks as you try to access the upper floors. That's why suburban walk-up stairway dependent buildings have somewhat of a new market allure. Poster child for Manhattan's current problem, former Time and Life building in Midtown Manhattan, now rebranded as 1271 Avenue of the Americas. This is one of America's iconic post-war office buildings. Built in 1957, it's now 63 years old. It's part of Rockefeller Center, the first movement of Rockefeller Center to the west side of 6th Avenue. 2.1 million square feet, 48 stories tall, recently fully renovated and reskinned for 8,000 workers, and it's fully leased. Currently, 500 workers per day show up, barely 6%. This is the new ghost town. Even with 30 elevators, density controls create logistical headaches. Okay, brief sidebar. The new office envy versus the old office envy. Old pre-pandemic office envy one. Who has the biggest corner office in the central office building? This is where you go when you're at the top. Old office envy two. This is the next level below the corner office. How do you rate your position? Who has the most ceiling tiles in their office? The new pandemic-driven office inventory. Who has the best dedicated home office space? Zoom embarrassment one. Work from home, WFH, stuck in the basement. Zoom embarrassment two. Work from home at the kitchen table. Again, new world that has emerged. Fundamental reset. This downturn is now recognized as a fundamental long-term disruption that requires resets by many organizations. The bottom line is the pandemic crisis is instigating a long overdue re-examination of the fundamentals of the workplace, work location, and the workforce. And each of these has tremendous transportation implications. Another issue, deepening disparities, the K-shaped recovery. This is of vital importance. Like any economic downturn, coronavirus recession has widened the gulf between those able to navigate its effects and those who cannot. Thus, there is not a singular recovery path. The swoosh line that I presented earlier has to be modified with a K superimposed on it. Two disparate trajectories coming from the swoosh, a two-track recovery or a two-lane recovery. Many Americans are prospering, while many are barely staying afloat or more ominously suffering. One example of the disparity is the Zoom and Gloom phenomenon, the Zoom and Gloom economy. We have a sharp divergence between what we could call the charm circle of elite credentialed professionals successfully working remotely at home. That's the upper arm of the K, and the simultaneous decimation of the lower wage, low credentialed office support workers, the lower arm of the K. Virtual workers are doing well, while the direct and indirect support workers, both inside the office and in the surrounding environment, bearing the brunt of the economic shock. So, the rapid adoption of remote working technology that has fostered economic continuity has simultaneously produced winners and losers. Other potential structural changes. Residential suburbanization is back on our radar screens. Not surprisingly, the suburbs had gotten a bad rap the past decade. Suburbs were viewed as the relic of the way we wanted to live in the 20th century. But suburbia is still New Jersey's core competence. It's our dominant land use, and the coronavirus may be causing another transformation. So there is boom amidst the economic gloom. Suburban house prices have surged and Zoom towns have emerged. And the emergence of Zoom towns is reshaping the residential landscape, and in turn may shape the post-pandemic office locational parameters and the location of economic activity. We've often heard a lot the past decade about live, work, play environments, LWP environments that were favored by millennials. Now we have suburban housing with single family units now representing the new LLWP habitat, WLWP habitat. The new housing model, both an apocalyptic bunker and a finished machine for living, internalizing all the amenities that were once provided by the external environment. So housing in many cases is now an amenity-laden, deeply feathered double LWP nest with the supplemental L, including learning space for home classrooms. So we have a live, learn, work, and play basic habitat. Acceleration of trend. Millennials had already entered the family raising stage of the life cycle and had just begun their suburban odyssey. Many had been sitting on the fence, delaying making a final decision. The pandemic has started to push many of them off the fence. Bottom line, the burbs are back somewhat, at least. The single family unit is again back. And the question is its sustainability. Has the future been accelerated too much? Has market demand been borrowed from the future? Perhaps, but it may be, there has been a slowdown in the suburban movement, but it may be the sheer shortage of suburban single family unit inventory that is inhibiting the satisfaction of demand. Multifamily housing construction was the growth locomotive the past decade. Single family home construction was the caboose. Another pattern or example of pandemic-driven structural change. New York City, New Jersey economic patterns. In the 10 years between February 2010 and February 2020, New York City had added almost 1 million jobs, New Jersey around 400,000 jobs. So New York City was clearly the region's economic growth locomotive. But then the pandemic hit. As shown in this slide, in 2 months, top third of the slide, New Jersey lost 831,000 jobs. New York City, a much greater 944,000 jobs. So New York City was pummeled just as much as New Jersey, or even more so, by the pandemic. But the 7-month reopening in the middle of the slide has favored New Jersey. As can be seen, New Jersey has gained almost 500,000 jobs, 486,000, compared to 372,000 in New York City. New Jersey's recovery rate through November, 58.4%, is half again as high as New York City's 39.4%. So at least currently, New York City may have lost some of its mojo, some of its motive power. One other final economic sector, manufacturing, which we tend to forget about. Manufacturing was once the centerpiece of New Jersey's economy. However, its relative importance has diminished during the past 4 decades, although it is still important. More importantly, the pandemic has now raised very serious questions about fragile global supply chain, the need to reshore critically important manufacturing activities. So in this context, I'd like to suggest there will be indeed a renewed emphasis on manufacturing. It's going to be a significant focus, I think, of economic public policy in Washington. However, I predict the factory of the future in New Jersey will consist just of 1 man and 1 dog. The man is needed to feed the dog, while the dog's job is to keep the man from touching the computer. It's not going to be as labor intensive as it was in the historic past. Okay, time is getting short. Now for those words you have been longing to hear, perhaps desperately longing to hear. In conclusion, we are undergoing a massive reshaping of the economy, and the long recovery crawl confronts us. The economy will improve by mid-year, but the recovery arithmetic is still daunting. We still have to recover 345,000 jobs to get back to our pre-recession employment levels. One thing is likely, we will not return to pre-pandemic economic normal. We have not yet come close to digesting long-lasting COVID-driven change. Technological and economic disruptions have been unleashed, and post-vaccination, we're not going to put the genie back in the bottle. The world is being transformed, and as suggested earlier, this provides new opportunities going forward. The old adage, a crisis is too good of an opportunity to waste. But more importantly, let's not leave the vulnerable behind. In any case, welcome to 2021. Let the reconstruction begin. Thank you.